What up, perps? Kate Copius, back in effect. Purple State Party. You know what we're doing here. Repping America, the center, and common sense. Wow, we've got some interesting articles this week, I'm telling you. But, first a disclaimer, there's a lot of things that you might read about in the news, and you wonder why I don't cover them. A lot of times I don't cover them because depending on who's the news source, there's often another side to it. So if you see something and you're wondering what I have to say about it, you can put it in the comment section. But I try to cover stories that I have vetted. So let's kick it off. So this week marked our first trillionaire, Elon Musk. Of course, the liberals are very upset about all this because, how dare he have all that money? It must be corruption. It must be bad practices. Well, in Musk's case, he backed a car, the Tesla, that was supposed to be for rich people so they didn't have to go to gas stations. And then the government starts offering all these rebates. And the left cheers for it. Oh, we're going green. We're going electric. Gavin Newsom here in California flat out said by 2030, there'll be no gas engines being sold here in California. It's all electric. So you wonder, you're putting money into Elon's pocket. Another way that Elon made money was that, the government, the U.S. government and other entities need to put satellites into space. We use satellites for everything nowadays. Internet, your data plan, your GPS, all that kind of stuff, right? So it's pretty expensive for NASA to do it. NASA has huge overheads and, they're already spending billions of dollars trying to get a man on Mars. So they go to these private companies and say, hey, for example, we'll pay you $100 million to put a satellite into orbit. That's half the cost for NASA. I'm just making up numbers right now, so don't quote me on it. But part of the deal that SpaceX signed was that they were going to be paid a certain sum to launch satellites into orbit. And if it costs more than the quoted amount, then that was on SpaceX. If it was under the amount, SpaceX got to keep the profit. They got to keep additional profit. And that's where Elon made a lot of his money, off of these rebates, these edicts, and just by getting satellites into orbit cheaper than the U.S. government and cheaper than what they were being paid to do. And it really shows you how private companies are really the better way of doing things. See, the government is spending your money. They're not spending their money. That's the big difference. Right now in California, the politicians will tell you that we need this bullet train from Palmdale to Gilroy or whatever it's going to be, right? It's supposed to be LA to San Francisco, but that ain't going to happen. And one of their big claims is that private companies are going to invest in the private rail system because, it's just a moneymaker. But what's the real truth? See, that's the problem we have is that if Gavin Newsom says, don't worry about the train, it's going to get paid for by private funds, it's going to make them a lot of money, they're tripping over themselves to invest. You just buy it. If you live in an echo chamber, you're going to buy whatever they tell you. If you live in the red echo chamber, you're going to believe everything Trump says. It's stupid both ways. Echo chambers suck, no matter what side you're on. All right. But the truth of the matter is private companies are not investing in the California bullet train. Why? Because it's not feasible. Those are just, sometimes life boils down to math. If the math doesn't add up, you're not going to do it. And they talk about, the Democrats here in California, they love to bring up places like Japan, Well, but the truth about Japan is that the Japanese rail system is run by a private company, but it was built with government funds. And it was built in a way that it is very feasible to use. It can be used daily use. What we're seeing here in Los Angeles with our trains is certain trains are packed right now because of the World Cup, because people are using them to get from the airport to the areas where, the games are being played or close to where the games are being played, shuttles, things like that. But for the daily Los Angelino, there's no use for them. So the private companies go, well, there's no money in it. They also like to bring up how a train that's going to run from Dallas to Houston is being privately funded. But that project is on pause right now because the costs are skyrocketing And the companies are getting worried. Why are the companies getting worried? Because you can look at Brightline in Florida, which runs, I believe it's Orlando to Miami. It gets a lot of tourist use, but not a lot of daily commuter use. So it's going bankrupt. And another one of the lines that they love to talk about in Florida, another bright line, is getting $3 billion in government funding. So again, it's not being privately funded. The only one that you could look at is Rancho Cucamonga to Las Vegas. And that's being funded by casinos that feed off of our addictions. And that's gambling is an addiction. Believe me, it's an addiction. I mean, I was recently in Nevada buying fireworks, and I was at a gas station, and I got out of the car. I couldn't believe it. $3.46 for gas. Oh, my goodness. But inside this tiny little gas station was a dozen slot machines and video poker machines. And there were people sitting there. And to my eye, they did not look like tourists. They did not look like people who were just stopping in. Maybe had come over from California and wanted to pull a few slots. These look like regulars. The way they talked to the clerks and stuff, they were regulars. Gambling is an addiction. But that one might actually work because it does make sense for somebody like myself to drive to Rancho Cucamonga, get on a train, and go to Vegas. Because you don't really need to have a car when you're in Vegas. Usually, there's going to be a shuttle, take you back to the hotel. You could basically you don't need a car. Last time I was in Vegas, I parked my car at the casino, and I walked everywhere. So you take that one instance where it works, and you extrapolate it to sell this thing to the population of California. Oh, look how well it works in France. Look how well it works in Japan. Look how well this Vegas to Cucamonga one's going. But that's not the reality of what we're building in the middle of California. It's a boondoggle. So let's move on to something else here. Ballot curing. A lot of people might not know about this. Here in California, we just send out mass amounts of mail-in ballots, and we're already finding out that the homeless are being paid to fill them out. But here's another thing they do. If the signatures on the mail-in ballot don't match, an attempt is made to cure that ballot of its problem, the signature, by contacting the voter and making sure that the voter actually voted. Well, here's what they do in California. They utilize the mass amount of people that could be mobilized by unions and special interest NGOs. So if you have a bill that's being sponsored by a union and it's going down in flames, they could always look at all the rejected ballots and they can go out and cure them. And do you think they're curing them evenly and fairly? No. The ballots that support them, they contact people. We are allowing non-government employees access to these ballots to fix them and fix an election. That's the problem. Because everything that they do, especially these unions, it's about making more money for the union. It's not about helping Californians. They make it out that way, but that's not what actually happens when they get the money. They passed one recently in LA to get more hospital funding, and that's great. That's cool, whatever. But that's not where the money's going to go. It's going to go into salaries. It's going to get sucked up into profit margins and things like that. And the union's going to get a giant cut of it. But what do we get? Pretty much the same thing we were getting before. It's just now those places are going to make more money off of us. You see? That's how it works. And then, especially here in California, where we've decided that we're going to pay for health care at emergency rooms for illegal aliens. Because that's how it works, you see. You go to the ER, you can't be turned away regardless of your ability to pay. So you go there with every, nick and scrape and cough and bad stomach. You get what you need. You get your medical treatment. But everybody else has to pay for it. And now they're going to raise sales tax in Los Angeles to get even more money. And more money will go into the union, and they'll just rinse and repeat, and they'll get rich off of it. And they use ballot curing as one of those things. Hey, let's get that stack of those bad ballots. Okay, and we just sort them out. Yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. Then they go out and they find the people who voted yes and say, hey, was this your signature? Yes, it was. Okay, now this vote counts. I don't care what side of the political spectrum you're on. I don't want this for anything. I mean, imagine imagine the uproar if we were trying to outlaw gay marriage and churches were going in and they were collecting the ballots and they were curing the ballots. It's a big problem. Another big problem we have here is way too many people in this country that weren't supposed to be here. And we did it while following Europe. Europe opened up their borders. So we did the same thing. Well, let's see if they're going to do the same thing as Sweden, because Sweden has passed what they call a highly controversial good behavior immigration law, allowing authorities to revoke the residency permits of immigrants over non-criminal misconduct. Of course, the critics and human rights groups say, oh, this is bad because it undermines the rule of law by penalizing non-criminal acts. Well, what are we looking at that are non-criminal acts? Unpaid debts? Engaged in undeclared work? Tax evasion? Benefit fraud? Those all seem like crimes to me. And maintaining links to extremist organizations. Again, that's a crime. I mean, being a supporter of terrorism is a crime. You know, having unpaid debts. I mean, come on, tax evasion. Why should people be allowed to stay? Another thing they're doing is they're abolishing the permanent residency for refugees. Refugees can get temporary permits to stay in the country, but why they're doing it is because they want to push highly integrated individuals towards seeking full citizenship through strict language and civic testing. Strict language and civic testing. That's only fair. I mean, right now we are having a problem with undocumented persons driving giant big rigs around, who don't understand basic English, who don't really understand the road signs, who sort of cheated their way through the test. Well, congratulations, Sweden. I think that's a great first step. If you have something, if you're running a country that everybody in the world wants to be a part of, you have to set some sort of boundaries. You can't say, look, the truth of the matter is Sweden, the United States, whoever you are, you don't need more scumbags. And if people are going to come over here illegally and then commit tax evasion and benefit fraud and things like that, why do we need those people? It's really easy for the Democrats especially to make the argument, oh, well, that guy just wants to come here to work to support his family. Sure, but when does that number become untenable? 10? 10,000? 10 million? At some point, the government, whichever government we're talking about, needs to realize that the numbers are too big for the solution you're proposing. Like in California, I think it's great. Oh, okay. Oh, some poor illegal alien hurt themselves and we're going to give them free medical care. That's cool. Multiply that by 100, by another 100, by another 100. At some point, you just can't afford it anymore. And that's what we need to start holding our politicians to. The fact, like the bullet train, it's never going to be profitable, because it's just going to cost, any money that they make is going to go right back into maintaining. And we're still going to be in the hole all the money that we spent building the damn thing. So, talking about money, Rob Bonta, a real scumbag of a person, has announced that California is forming an affordability response team to address the cost of living in California. From education, housing, healthcare, and even groceries, Americans are concerned about the rising cost of living. And here in California, a lot of us certainly feel the squeeze. Yeah. A recent study by Berkeley, okay? Groceries, 11% more expensive here in California. Even though we have all the ports, we have all the agriculture, we have the ranches, we have all the infrastructure for groceries, and yet we're 11% higher than the average. Gas, 40% more expensive than the rest of the country. We have oil here. We could be drilling our own oil. Utilities, 61% more expensive. But what do they want to crow about in Sacramento? Oh, it's green. I don't give a shit. You're taking my green. So they're going to have an affordability. According to Bonta here, it's going to draw on the knowledge of experts from sections across the department, working together to find, investigate, and go after individuals and corporations deploying unlawful practices that are making life unaffordable for the people of California. What? You don't have to do unlawful practices. Start in Sacramento. Okay, Rob? All right, Robbie? Can you go to Sacramento and start there? Because those are the people. Look at this one. California is getting ready to increase a health insurance tax. Why? Okay. So the federal government put a new cap on how much California can tax Medi-Cal. Okay? So California is going to lose billions of dollars because they're going to have to reduce their tax on the federal government's Medicaid, Medi-Cal. It's a big scramble, man. I'm not the guy to unsort it for you. But to offset the federal reduction of taxes, they want to raise taxes on private insurances. And they frame it like, we're taxing the evil insurance companies. Well, those evil, I'm making air quotes, insurance companies are just going to pass that tax on to the consumers. So everybody's health insurance is going to go up 1% to 2%, depending on how greedy their companies are. They want a single payer system. The government of California and Democrats at large want a single payer system, which means the government handles your health insurance. Wow. That really sucks. Because first of all, that's going to add to time. That's going to add to the bureaucracy, the red tape, the hoops. It's going to lead to tons and tons more rejections than you get from the private sector. And it's going to be rife with fraud. So much of the money is just going to go bye-bye out the door to fraud because we've already seen it. Here in California, we already had that investigation in LA where they found dozens of so-called hospices registered to the same address. They couldn't even figure that out, and they want us on a single-payer system? No. Not at all. And who leads this pack right now? Newsom. Newsom right now, is being investigated by the federal government. And, of course, he claims it's a witch hunt by Trump because, that's what you do when a Democrat's backed into a corner, Trump, right? Not a cohesive argument, but just Trump. And that's supposed to end the argument. But the reason this is, and again, this goes back to the echo chamber, because the people who live in the echo chamber of Gavin Newsom believe that this is because Trump's being a mean man. But the reality is that his former chief of staff, Dana Williamson, has recently pled guilty to 3 felonies pertaining to campaign finance fraud and federal tax evasion. Whoa, what? Yeah, that was started under Biden, and it came from whistleblowers. And when that came to light, Newsom said, we've all got to be held to the letter of the law. Well, now the federal agents are knocking on his door because whistleblowers are concerned about some of the stuff he's been doing, right? So they're looking at the Newsom's taxes. Well, years ago, his wife, Sybil, or however you pronounce that stupid name, founded the Representation Project, a nonprofit advocating for gender equality through documentary filmmaking. And they started putting out movies. We'll get into that in a second. But her salary over 8 years was $1.5 million. And she has also taken $1.6 million out of that to her private production company, Girls Club Entertainment, which again makes movies such as Misrepresentation, The Mask You Live In, The Great American Lie, and Fair Play. And these are movies that are have been shown in 5,000 public schools in all 50 states, with her organization apparently positioned to collect the licensing fee for the screenings. So she's taking charity money and turning it into private money. You're not really supposed to do that. So they show these films, and in these films, you have Gavin Newsom coming on screen talking about student viewers to organize with friends and vote for politicians supporting a care economy that embraces universal human values. Right. Those are campaign ads for the Democrats. So now you're using your position and taxpayer dollars to campaign in schools, to say, oh, Republicans will cut all these benefits. But these movies that they're making, well, it's cool that we're teaching more about acceptance. I'm fine with that. But some of these films, there's one that had images of a woman being physically brutalized, and it was sourced from an adult website. And they're showing these in schools. They're telling them, after you show this, you might need the counselors to come in and talk to the students. What? We don't need that. His wife also co-founded the California Partners Project, a nonprofit focused on women in corporate leadership and child online safety. And they've sourced millions and millions of dollars from different companies, and including $1.8 million from the Federated Indians of Grattan Rancheria, who then turned around and tried to stop other tribes from launching their own casinos. So again, here you go. You got Gavin Newsom and his wife having a charity, an Indian conglomerate donates money to it, and then tries to wield that power to stop other Indian tribes from having a casino. It's buying political influence. That's what it is. That's concerning. There's another entity, the California Protocol Foundation, whose board is stacked with Newsom loyalists from his time in San Francisco. And you know what this place does? It covers the expenses the governor says he doesn't want taxpayers to fund, including domestic and overseas travel. So he's formed a charity that raises money to pay his bills so he can go on trips. The nonprofit arrangements have drawn scrutiny not just from federal investigators, but from journalists who have tracked the Newsom's financial relationships over the years. Among the most striking examples detailed in the book, Fool's Gold, is Pacific Gas and Electric. They were responsible for the deadly fire up north. Yeah, those guys. And they have been pumping millions of dollars into his campaigns and other charities. So again, you have this major utility who's paying him money for influence. Over 2 decades, Newsom and his wife have accepted a combined $700,000 in donations from PG&E, including $200,000 from employees during his first gubernatorial campaign alone. That group also donated to the Plump Jack Foundation, a charity with Newsom and one of the Gettys, and it's run by the governor's sister. So again, it's a little bit too nepotistic here, and billions of dollars. But back to who really started this. The real truth of the matter is that his former chief of staff, Dana Williamson, essentially raided Becerra, the guy running for governor, raided his campaign coffers and took $200,000. She then was writing off all kinds of expenses that she shouldn't have been writing off. So milking the taxpayers for that, travel, clothing, things like that. That's what they do. But they are so in bed with the special interests. And the problem that we should all have with these special interest groups is that it's about their interest. It's not about the rest of us. It's not about what's doing right for Californians. It's about what's doing right for that company. And you have a party like the left, the Democrats, who rail against evil corporations, but then take all of this money from the evil corporations and then help the evil corporations, but then tell the voters they're evil corporations, vote for us, we will stop them. That's the problem we have. I mean, you want to know, Rob Bonta wants to investigate affordability in California. Look no further than the special interest groups. The people who stand in the way of actual lower income housing. The NIMBYs, who use all these regulations and restrictions and fees and all this stuff to sue people into delaying their project to try to make it so expensive that they just abandon it. Nothing's getting done here in California. We brag about the 4th largest economy. Okay, but shouldn't that bring more perks? Why are we number 1 in poverty? We're supposed to be this giant economy. Why do we have the highest unemployment rates? Why is it that every day things get more expensive? Why is it that working folks have to bear the brunt of the homeless crisis. Coming back from Nevada, all I saw was open land. Look, if people don't want to live in a house, if people don't want to have a job, if people don't want to pay bills, if people just want to lay around in a tent all day and smoke crack, let them. But not in the cities, not in the parks, not in the schools. We're the fourth largest economy in the world. Why aren't we building a place to put these people? A sort of humane jail, if you will. Why? Because special interest? Because they're blowing the money on other projects? Because they're lining their own coffers? Yeah. That's the problem. I don't care what fucking political party you are. I don't want you wasting our money. I don't. The federal government does what the federal government does, okay? Regardless. Obama, Clinton, Bush, Trump. There's only so much we can do about the federal government. What we got to rein in is our states. And one of the things that would really, really help is if we had any trusted news sources left anymore. But that ship sailed. That ship sailed. You got to do your own research. It's the most disheartening thing about what I'm attempting to do here with Purple State. Because I'm seeing no gains. I'm seeing everybody just still flocking to the extremes. I'm not seeing things being called out. I'm not seeing Democrats stepping up. I mean, you got one Democrat that you ever hear from, John Fetterman, who steps up and says, well, this is bullshit. We shouldn't do this. But where are all the rest of them? Where are they at the local levels, the state levels? Why aren't they stepping up here in California? Why aren't they admitting their mistakes? That's so frustrating. I'm dealing with a family issue right now that's the same exact thing. My brother just can't admit that he's got a problem and that he's caused a lot of shit for my family. Take responsibility. But as long as they can live in an echo chamber, they'll never have to take responsibility. So, do your best to just step out of that echo chamber. Thank you for your time. It means a lot. Every time anybody watches any of my videos, it really means a lot. I'm a proud American, and I know what America could be. But there's people out there trying to destroy it. No, I'm not one of them. I'm Kid Copious. I'm Purple State Party. And so are you. Love one another. Keep on grinding. And like I always say, because it's really important to me, when the pressure gets too much, crank the tunes and dance it out.